Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tired Pod. We're back and we're more tired than ever. Shez, how are you doing?
Man, you beat me to it. I'm really tired.
I am too. I am too. We're back a couple of days after the race in the 305.
This is a good segue into our next little segment about stewarding and racing incidents, right?
Let's do it. Yeah.
But listen, I'm going to put it out there. I think science got very hot-headed this race again.
Again with you and oh God.
Like number one, there was no reason to get that angry about the move into turn 12, right? Okay, he got pushed off the road, but actually you're the car on the outside, man. That's what's going to happen. And we can talk about what the racing rules and stuff are, and I think we will in a second. But that was never going to get a penalty. And sitting there driving with anger. Martin Brundle always says, never drive angry. And that's what Carlos was doing after that. And I think that played directly into the move that he tried to pull on Oscar into the final proper corner. Because that wouldn't have happened. That late lunge and the locking wouldn't have happened if he'd just been calmer about it. And he just ruined both their
Why
races.
did they give him only a 5-second penalty then?
As opposed to
why isn't it a 10-second?
You're quibbling about how much
my quibbling. Yes, exactly, and there's a reason for that, and that is the damn inconsistency of, I can't even say my word, is not being consistent. That's the issue. It wasn't as egregious as it looks. I think, again, we're playing the result where, because Oscar had a broken front wing, it just felt like we had to give him something. I'm just telling you how it feels. And I know this is not always scientific and objective, but it's starting to feel like that over and over again, because in the sprint on Saturday, Lewis effectively took out two Astons. And I know it's the first lap. I get it, but that was pretty over the line, and there was not even an investigation about it, let alone a penalty. And then I don't understand, like, why is it so inconsistent? I cannot, and it shouldn't be. I know there are rules, there are standards and all that, but it should be one where we as the audience can see something and be able to, at least 80% of us, be on the same page.
Sure,
we can't always have consensus.
Sure, but okay, so we're getting into the realms of whataboutism here, right? Because yes, you can argue that Lewis should have been investigated, but then Lance should have been investigated too for turning in on his teammate. Neither of those things happened. But none of that, Ammar, changes the fact that Sainz should have got a penalty for the move that he pulled on Oscar.
It does change.
Both of those should have got a penalty.
Because you said no, but you set the precedent by not investigating that. Therefore, you cannot turn around next day and start to give a penalty. That's what I'm saying.
Their argument was that it was in the first corner. Right.
Oh,
that's why they did it.
The first corner, you can do anything you want.
First corner.
If Checo had taken out the two Ferraris, then what would we be doing at that point? You'd only get a 5-second or a 10-second, right?
But taking out all the Ferraris,
the Ferraris in the first turn, which he effectively just did. I mean,
yeah, but in the same way as Lance Stroll and Lewis Hamilton did not get investigated, Perez also didn't get an investigation
because he didn't take out anyone.
But it's not about consequence. It's about intent, isn't it? So if you come into a corner hot and uncontrolled, then you should get a penalty. It shouldn't be about the consequence.
Then why did he get a penalty?
Why did who get a penalty?
Why didn't Checo get a penalty? He clearly came in hot and uncontrolled. Why?
Because
even in the race itself,
so I don't look. I don't disagree with you, but their argument was that it's the opening lap and everyone gets a bit more leeway. But I agree that Lewis definitely came in uncontrolled into that first corner. In the sprint, he was essentially using the cars on the outside of him to slow his car down, and that's what triggered that little that knock into Fernando. But Fernando was already in the middle of a sandwich because his teammate had turned in on him. So where do you draw the line between those two causing an incident? Checo similarly went in completely uncontrolled, locking up and ending up in the runoff. So yeah, by rights that should have been investigated. But when there wasn't a consequence to it, but there also wasn't. It was also the opening lap that was never going to be investigated because they sorted it out themselves. The Carlos incident against Oscar into the final corner, look, that had to be looked at, especially when all of the Kevin Magnussen incidents were looked at. And we'll have to talk about Kevin in a second because the stewarding options in that were interesting. But in the Carlos Piastri incident, so the race have just put out an article about some the new racing rules for 2024, which are meant to make things a bit clearer for the stewards and make things a bit more consistent. And apparently this is what they've been using over the course of this season before the rules get enshrined in the International Sporting Code next year. But just have a little listen to what you need to do to not get a penalty when passing on the inside, right? So what they've said is that you have to have the front axle at least alongside the front axle of the other car at the apex of the corner and to the exit. So Carlos probably fulfills that. You need to be able to make the corner within the track limits, which again, I think Carlos did. But it needs to be driven in a safe and controlled manner throughout the maneuver, entry, apex, and exit. He didn't do that. He locked up his rear, had an oversteer moment, and that specific moment knocked his rear end into Oscar's front wing and broke it. So you had uncontrolled and you had consequence. That was going to be a penalty. I thought that in real time, and that's what happened afterwards as well. I knew he was driving with with that hanging over his head.
You were doing psychology as he was driving too.
And I think five seconds is not an unreasonable amount, because as you say, it wasn't an egregious move. It was yes, it was a bit of a lunge, but it wasn't like overly optimistic. But he did have an uncontrolled moment, and he did knock the rear of his car.
Should only be a 1 second penalty. That's it.
There's no such thing as a 1 second penalty, my friend.
It should be. No, I'm with you. I don't know since when I became Carlos Sainz's Minister of Defense. I don't know when, but my beef really isn't with that. My beef is just the inconsistency of it throughout the weekend. Like, there's a lot of at times it feels like they're looking at the consequence of things, and then a lot of times they're not. And I just don't get it. I mean, I also don't agree that if it's the first lap that we should just allow people to just kind of go crazy and take anyone out, because in the Checo Perez thing, the only thing that changes whether a decision is made or not is whether he takes it. That's it. So you can't say it's the first lap and then say, well, no, because there was no consequence. It can't work both ways. Either the consequences or not. And oh, by the way, just because there wasn't any damage doesn't mean that there wasn't consequence, because the two Ferraris got passed, right? They did.
But actually, the consequence thing is consistent, because there were consequences the day before in the sprint. And again, that whole incident wasn't investigated. So actually, if you're going to argue about it, they were consistent. No, consequences. They were consistently inconsistent. Yeah. Everyone's favorite.
It's just.
Well, no, it was actually just to look at another incident, because the one that I think was probably the more interesting one to look at was Sainz on the outside of Piastri, where Sainz was pushed off the track. And then complained about it, and this is what we've referenced earlier, and then was hot-headed about it and got angry. So what do you think? Do you think that Piastri deserved a penalty?
He should have given he should have given the position.
Okay. Tell me why.
That's exactly why. He pushed him off the track. That's it. Simple as that. It doesn't have to be that complicated.
Yeah, but it is, as always, right?
But why? Why should we make everything complicated?
Because because it's exactly this. You see it as he should have had to give it back. I see it as the same way that McLaren saw it, which is that actually that was a fair move. That was Carlos trying to go around the outside of a corner, and ultimately, when you hang it around the outside of a corner, you're always at risk of being run out of road, and that is exactly what happened. He got run out of road. This isn't just me. When you have someone saying, "Oh, he got pushed off," and you have another person saying, "Well, he should have expected that to happen, so there shouldn't be a penalty," you've got two differing views, and the stewards have to come to an agreement where they take all partiality out of it and go, "It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you think. These are the rules, and there are rules for it." Do you want to hear them?
Why not?
Yes. Rules help organize the fun. That's the quote, isn't it? Here we go. So the guides for overtake for the outside, you have to have the overtaking car has to have their front axle at least alongside the mirror of the other car no later than the apex of the corner. That didn't happen. Be driven in a safe and controlled manner throughout the maneuver. Yes. Without deliberately forcing the other car off the track at the exit, right? So this is the car being overtaken. Has to provide enough, can't deliberately force the car off the track, which includes leaving a fair and acceptable width for the car being overtaken from the apex to the exit of the corner. But you have to have been alongside in the first place and be able to make the corner within the track limits. Did that. So Piastri kind of fulfills all of the requirements for for not having to concede or give room to the overtaking car. So that's why he didn't have to give the place back.
You can hit me up with each and every rule, but when you're watching it and two of us cannot agree, then to me there's something wrong. That's just
no, that's not true. No. That's definitely not true, Ammar. Because like, how many times do people look at the same incident and depending on their biases, depending on how they view races, their previous.
I am not the one wearing a McLaren shirt.
Ammar, it doesn't. Yeah, but you are wearing a Ferrari cap, aren't you? So that
I mean, clearly, he's gone like.
So that clearly tells you that like two people can look at the same incident and have two different views, but the stewards cannot. They have to have one view because we're always going to argue about this. Having two different views is just normal.